So I think in our company, my colleague Sakis is here and he's got a question for these guys. I was intending to do one with data, but I think his is also very interesting. So Sakis, please go ahead.
Hi from me. I'm Sakis Triantafyllakis, co-host of Tech Talk Central, and I really enjoyed the conversation earlier. So I have a question for all of you. Artificial intelligence is something that is pretty trendy right now. We gather all that data from all kinds of sources and sensors and wearables and whatever. But the thing is that we train certain algorithms and we're educating and creating smart systems. What are we going to do when computers will be clever, will be more intelligent than human beings? Will that be the end of the human race?
Well, you'll have to come to Monday afternoon session with James Tagg. Are the androids dreaming yet? Because he's just written a book about that subject, about when we can expect our smartphones to be smarter than us. And I think it's a really interesting question, and it freaks me out a bit, so I try not to think about it too much. Because
we've all seen Terminator.
Yeah, exactly. And I was, my first night here, I was woken up very early in the morning by the garbage trucks going around the streets, and I thought about driverless cars, and I'm thinking, well, there'll be driverless garbage trucks, and it'll just be these massive, great, big robots going around the streets picking up our garbage, and then.
But they will be more intelligent if you think about it. They will know which bin will be full, and if they should go by that. You know, it's sort of like a balance.
Yes, I agree, but it's not that far away, and it's still really freaky to think about this stuff and what that means for human beings in terms of what we do every day. Because everybody's job will be disrupted at every single level. It's, you're not safe because you're a doctor or a lawyer or whatever else. It's at every level. So I think being mindful and conscious of this happening and having conversations about it and thinking about it is a good thing. There's no way to solve the problem right now, and I don't know when the smartphones will be smarter than us. We will have to ask James tomorrow at 5:30.
And that's mobileheroes.net for more information. Kirsty had mentioned earlier assistive applications, and I don't think it was quite in this context, but I think if we think about what artificial intelligence can offer everyday life and people in terms of assistive technology, and someone says being mindful of what that is, and I think the outlook that we should take when it comes to artificial intelligence is what is helpful and what's just technology for technology's sake, and what is disruptive in a bad way. So I think instead of replacing doctors, how can we use artificial intelligence to make their jobs easier and make the outcomes better? Again with the garbage trucks, again maybe we can just figure out which ones are empty or full and need to be empty, rather than picking up every single one on the street. I think the key to that, though, is sort of us as human beings having a little bit of restraint, which I'm not sure is something that we're always really good at collectively. So I mean, I do think it's a big question to ask and a challenge that we have to face.
Yeah, this is a pretty big subject. I absolutely believe that computers will become more intelligent than humans. It's not a question of if, it's when. I think the real concern comes from once they get to that point, they just run off in a kind of cascade. It's the singularity that people talk about. And a lot of people much smarter than me have sort of said it's going to be the Terminator scenario, and others have said it's kind of the utopian scenario. I think the reflection on this is it's going to be a massive inflection point, and honestly it's very difficult to understand what's going to happen at that point. But equally well, I think you can look back a couple of thousand years, and if you think about Roman times, or even further back, kind of Stone Age man would look at society today and it would be completely alien and unrecognisable to him. I'm not suggesting it's going to necessarily be quite that big in a kind of like a 3 or 4 year time period. It won't be totally overnight, but it could be very quick indeed. And just as technology has pretty much made the world unrecognisable in the last 30 or 40 years, it really has only just got going. And I think AI is fundamentally tied to that. Honestly, yeah, it does scare me a great deal because, like most humans, I'm not terribly comfortable with fast, rapid change. But it's also a massive opportunity. It's actually, I tend to see technology as a very positive force, all the great changes it's made, and I'm optimistic enough to think that it will actually be a positive thing. I think there are people who are much smarter than me about talking about AI, and I would point out we're already there. There's a lot of analysis already going on improving systems, and basically a lot of technology is actually based around taking disparate bits of data, pulling it together, and particularly in the aggregated sense, making decisions off the back of that. And actually, to me, that's pretty positive. But yeah, I guess I welcome our computer overlords in due course.
Anyway, guys, because we don't have a lot of time, this is the last question, a wrap-up question. So, what didn't I ask you? What would be that question that you would really like to answer to? So, what kind of topic should we have more? If we did have more time, should we be talking about? Helen, you seem to be thinking a lot about it, so I am going to give the microphone to you.
Thanks, Vicki. Nothing like being put on the spot. What could we have talked about? I think there's we should be talking about advertising and ethics in the digital world, and data privacy, and what we do with that data and what it actually means. Because anonymous data is anything but anonymous. It's not that difficult to match data to a person if you really wanted it to. And that's certainly a topic I'd like to explore another time.
Yeah, I totally agree with Helen. I miss a little bit about privacy and what you do with this data and the security and how is avoiding these rules in Google and these kind of things.
Stop passing the microphone down. Please answer, Carlos.
No, I sort of know what I want to say. I just needed another minute to put it in the right order. I think on top of privacy and those sorts of things, regulation in general. I'm not sure if that's necessarily the best word to use, but I'm thinking in terms of this discussion we've just had in the United States regarding net neutrality and how that's come to pass, and what that means both for the internet as a whole and how that's being applied to mobile networks. Because I think traditionally a lot of people have argued, oh, mobile is different, it needs to be managed in a special way, and so that makes doing certain things that ISPs on the wired side couldn't get away with. And so I think what we've seen happen in the US is just the first of many battles that are going to play out in the rest of the world.
Thank you, Carlo, for giving me some more thinking time there. I think we could talk about usability in quite a specific way, but also make the point more generally that as mobile becomes increasingly dominant, it actually reaches across very many different sectors and, more to the point, very many different kind of consumer segments. And there's talk about addressing the grey market or millennials, and I think there actually needs to be more acknowledgement that there's more differentiation within the kind of customer base than people ever realise. And so this idea that you create a single app or service that can address your entire addressable market or your opportunity, I think, is something that is a simplification. And so understanding how you do that is going to be increasingly important. And together with that is the idea that it's not just a single app, or it's not just about mobile. It is this, I don't like to use the buzzword omni-channel, but it's a very useful way of explaining that things will start offline, might go to web, might go to mobile, and having a consistent experience and a way of addressing whatever you're trying to do is something that we just don't really see yet. It's very, very difficult, and it's incredibly difficult not just to design, but to talk about in a convincing way, because traditionally companies are based around deriving their value from where they get their direct value from, And so much of mobile is about influence and indirect value. Explaining to companies that that point is important, I think goes along with that stratification of their kind of addressable market, and it ultimately does come back to usability, because none of it is going to work if people find it difficult to use. It's the old chestnut about technology. It doesn't work until it's easier than whatever it's trying to replace.
I'm really still interested in you know, we've got to a point where Google and Facebook and Apple are ubiquitous, and it gets to a point where you feel like there has to be something next, and I don't know whether, I'm not necessarily been convinced by wearables. I've not seen something that's really going to replace or improve upon the smartphones that we have already, and generally tablets. Everyone stopped talking about them. Just was that a kind of, we only have two hands, and they look like a digital picture frame, and that seems to be the ceiling for them. I mean, so I'm interested to know if they're going anywhere next. Also, I mean, all of these things kind of point to a kind of, we need some kind of global decision, or you know, global way of managing this kind of stuff, a digital Magna Carta, as Tim Berners-Lee would have it, and you know, some ethics in tech people, and perhaps citizens becoming you know, not just consuming but actually understanding the things that they're signing up to in order so that they can make kind of better decisions about the technology that they're using, and actually be involved with the discussion about where things go. I think that's what I'd like about.
Great, so I did manage to raise more questions from you, from the ones we already answered, which is good, which opens up for future podcasts. Thank you very much for being with us. Helen, Mobile Heroes and Helen for organising it. Rosa, Carlos, Rafe, and Kirsti. Also, I'd like to thank my colleagues Sakis and Yannis Rizopoulos, who's been video
filming all
this. And this is Vicki Kolovou for Tech Talk Central. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Vicki.
Thank you.
Nice.
Brilliant.